Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 4-year-old Dr. Fundi Digital Health Channel. My name is Dr. Fundi Lenyati, alternatively known as Dr. Fundi. I'm a qualified family physician who's been in practice for over 30 years, but also a healthcare entrepreneur. And today, we have an interesting conversation in prospect. We are still, continuing with our Health Manifesto webinar series. Our guest today is Mr. Bongani, Mr. Bongani Baloyi, who is the founder and the president of the Xiluva Party. He was born in Togoza in the East Rand, from a family that's politically inclined, which exposed him to politics from a very young age. He later moved to the Vaal Triangle in the Mid-Vaal region of Gauteng. He became the youngest mayor in South Africa after being elected executive mayor of the Mid-Vaal local municipality in 2013. That's just over a decade ago. He attributes part of his success story during his tenure to the employees of the municipality and the community, who he says are the true heroes of that region. Under his leadership, Mid-Vaal was able to achieve an impressive track record, receiving 8 executive clean audits, right? And also that was a clear demonstration of its financial, prudence and accountability. He was nominated as one of the 100 most influential young South Africans by Avance Media in 2020. And his leadership skills are a true testament to the accolades. He holds a Bachelor of Business Administration, BBA, from Regenesis Business School, and brings a wealth of knowledge and experience within the political space and has deep understanding of the challenges of all spheres of government. He aims to grow Xiluva and make it a compelling alternative for many South Africans. His goal is to ensure that the party's omnipresence, something that can impact future nation building. He plans to reinforce voting as a pivotal tool for change. He also aims to empower patriotic, visionary, dedicated, and trusted young people in leadership role in government. This will give them a platform to create economic development and opportunities for all. Young people must know that education is not for employment only, but education gives you the tools and to be innovative and ultimately make it possible to be actively involved in our economy through entrepreneurship. Outside of politics, he's interested in agriculture, enjoys sports, particularly soccer, cricket, and rugby. I hope he's not a Kaizer Chiefs fan.
Fortunately, I am.
And spends time with his family, and that is the cherished aspect of his personal life. So that's a bit about our guest today. Mr. Baloyi, welcome to the Dr. Fundi channel.
Thank you so much, and good evening, and thank you for having me on your channel. Whenever people read my bio, it feels like I'm at my funeral and it's an obituary.
We are giving you your flowers, man, when you can still smell them. All right. So, as I was preparing for this, conversation, first thing I noticed was the issue about, I wanted to know what is Xiluva. Then I was able to Google and find out that it's about a flower. But now
Absolutely.
I don't associate a flower with politics, maybe a thorn with politics, because as an opposition person, then you are a thorn on the governing party. But a nice flower, this is a dog-eat-dog kind of environment. So why the flower and, the name Xiluva?
Well, firstly, we felt that our body politics is littered with all sorts of political parties that draw their existence from the contemporary type of political ideologies. And they often say socialism, liberalism, all these isms. which are not born out of our context as Africans. So we felt, Guti, the first point for us is to have Ubuntu as an ideology that is our preference, and we must then invest in defining Ubuntu beyond I am because we are. And we felt that what we want to contribute to our country is actually symbolic to a flower. A flower is something beautiful that you give. It's an act of love. It's an act of appreciation. And before you can enjoy a flower, you must plow the land, you must work the land, you must plant the seed, you must nurture, and you must water the seed, which is what we've been doing. So we believe that the politics of our country must have a fundamental disruption, and away from politics of anger, politics of revolutionary talk and speak, but about the new perspectives. And that's why we felt that let's name ourselves Xiluva, which is a Tsonga word for a flower, beautiful flower, imbalente. So we firmly believe that this is what we contribute and deliver to our society. So the flower will be a demonstration and an outcome of the collective work we put in for the betterment of our society.
Beautiful. So in the past, you were with two other parties before. When you were a mayor, you were with one party. And then in between then and now, there was another party. I'm not going to promote them in this show, but I just wanted to mention that. But when one looks at one of the ideologies, that the ideology that I picked up that you guys follow is communitarianism or something like that. Can you just explain what that is? It's a tongue twister. I struggle, to actually, pronounce that word.
So it comes from our ideology, which is Ubuntu. Ubuntu has three aspects which must work with each other at all times, which is the first part is Isintu, the second part is Amasi, and the last part is Umuntu Abantu. So then, for the purpose of this argument, now let's focus on Umuntu Abantu. So that fundamentally is a departure from how we enter politics. We've always been taught in the liberalism that it's individual first. So from individual, we are saying, actually, we're not an individual society. We are a communitarian society, which means it is the community first. So it's on the basis, you become an individual on the basis of your delivery to the community table. When you deliver your worth and you contribute positively, then you become umuntu. So that's why they're saying umuntu ngabantu. So you don't become an individual by birth alone. Technically, you become an individual which has grown, that has come to being on the basis of your contribution towards the communal table. And because we are communitarians as African people, it certainly affects how we relate to the economy, how we relate to the environment, and how we relate to ourselves as well. So that's a fundamental departure. So when we are a communitarian society, what does that mean about economics? What does it mean about wealth of this country, the mineral wealth of this country? So do we mean we support the current system where it places the individual above the group? You've got a few millionaires, 2-3 billionaires, but the broader population is poor. I mean, what does it mean? It's a reflection of our society. So it certainly means that the type of system, political system and ideology we'll be following is one that has actually alienated ourselves from ourselves.
Yes, lovely. Now I better understand that. So on the 30th of March, you guys were celebrating your first year of existence as the Xiluva Party. What are the highlights in that first year? Since you guys launched your party?
Look, the highlights has been the growth of the party and the fact that we've built a party that is resilient, the party that is agile, the party that has lasted and overcome serious hurdles, and the fact that we've actually gone through a process where, when you launch a new party, you attract all sorts of things. People who have no intention to build just one positions and want to extract. And we've been able to protect the center of the party and insulate ourselves from those influences and getting rid of the type of people and individuals who do not have any business to be in our politics and more so in our party, because they reflect the type of challenges of leadership we have today in our contemporary problems. And therefore, to find ourselves becoming a breeding ground for the same type of leadership was something that we had to deal with very early on, to ensure that we remain pure to our cause. So the fact that we've also grown a party over the past year without finances and more so when we've taken a decisive decision that we will not appeal for finances from families that are part of the problem in our country, and rather survive children of poverty. So we know what it is to survive, and that's what we have done. But most importantly, now we are on the ballot, on the national ballot and the provincial ballot of Gauteng, which is a big achievement for us.
Lovely. So, I mean, the political space is highly contested. You come from bigger parties and you started your own party and you've managed to grow it in a year. Now, for somebody who has not yet decided which political party that they're going to be voting for, what would you say are the three differentiators, the things that should make people sit up and say, you know what, I want to put my X next to, the Xiluva Party?
Look, let's put our ideology aside for a moment, and let's get to what demonstrates that we are the only alternative. All political parties in the country, except for Xiluva, are saying they want to work within the current system, which is a constitutional democracy. We fundamentally differ there. We fundamentally believe that we need a departure from that point of view, and it must move from a constitutional democracy to a parliament sovereignty. So we are the only party saying, get out of this system we've been trapped in for the past 30 years because it has not delivered the type of democratic dividends to Black people that it should have, right? We also acknowledge that over the past 30 years, there has been marginal increase and improvement of lives of Black people, more so in terms of access to services and various other government-related services. So we are saying, get out of this system and get into a system where when Parliament makes law, Parliament is the only and highest authority to change those laws and no longer the Constitutional Court. We have found that the Constitutional Court has actually been transgressing in areas which it shouldn't have transgressed, and more so dealing with policy. And we actually have made an assessment that over the past 30 years, this democracy has actually worked for minorities. In fact, the fact that they can go to a constitutional court has actually reinforced and empowered their power to actually run government through our courts. And it does not make sense when a people like ours, a majority, opts not for a system which consolidates all power of making laws in Parliament and leaving that to constitution. So for us, that's a fundamental departure. So everybody is saying, let's work within the system. And we're saying, no, we're not fighting to be the prefects of the system. We're fighting to get out of the system and go towards a system that will actually advance the lives of Africans. In fact, that's the main differences with everybody else. Now, the question will arise surely later that once we have gotten out of the system, what then do we do with the power that will be vested in Parliament?
Yeah. Well, there's another party, I'm not going to mention its name. It's being accused of having stolen something from another party, and they are also talking this parliamentary supremacy. They want to do away with the constitution as a whole. But anyway, let's leave that. So what are the priorities in your manifesto as Xiluva Party? What are the priorities? I'm not sure whether there's 3 of them or 4 of them or 5 of them. Just quickly, because I want us to go into the health part of your manifesto.
Absolutely. So I'll speak to 3 main ones. We firstly say, let's restructure government. The first thing for us to restructure government is to move away from our current constitutional democracy towards a parliament sovereignty. And then the second part is that we must reduce cabinet by half. The third part is that we must do away with all provinces, and there must be a devolution of all of those competencies that are provincial responsibilities to local municipalities. Then the next one is that we must reduce local municipalities from 257 to 60 districts in the country. Now, then you devolve all of those powers taken from provinces, and then you also ensure that the competencies follow the resource and the the financial resource and the human resource. Then when we move away from restructuring government, or the last part of restructuring government is having one synchronized election every 5 years, as opposed to the country being in election mode every 2.5 years, which is not really good for long-term planning and consolidation of government. Then the next part, we're saying, let's unlock citizen potential. There's unemployment, poverty, and inequality, which is the key inhibitors of citizen potential. So how do we do with that? So let's start with the most vulnerable part of our society, which is young people who are unemployed and unemployable. So those ones who are most vulnerable, we must actually take them for conscription, 2.5 years in conscription, military service. So then you immediately deal with that you are facing. In fact, as I speak about these things, you start to learn why others are speaking about it before we had the chance to speak about it, because they had access to our documents. So we've really inspired quite a number of people to talk about these things today. So when we deal with
but now some of us still remember that conscription period, before 1994, where all the white young men had to go and do 2 years of military service. So you're saying, let's bring that in, but use it for good and not to fight our neighbors as South Africa.
No, absolutely.
Basically,
in any case, absolutely. I mean, in any case, they've been defunding the military of the country. And remember, one of the key functions of the military is to protect the integrity of our borders and protect South Africa from internal and external threats. So when you defund the military, both in technology and in human bodies, and you have a military which is aging, and you don't infuse a high number of young people, it becomes a problem, because I'm thinking about the future of the country, not about where we are. And the decisions taken today is really going to affect us. So you need to take on board these young people. But the other problem which manifests in terms of health related challenges is that these young people are drinking and smoking hubbly-bubbly and engaging in risky sexual behaviors. That has a consequence into the future workforce of the country. It has a consequence on lifespan and mortality rates of these people and productivity as well, which I'm very concerned about. So we must rescue them and pull them out of the pit they are in and put them into a path that will ensure that they are productive for a longer period of time. So when we also do so, then that must identify opportunities that are out of the country, abroad, for our young people, and government must actually lead a process of saying there's so many opportunities in China for teachers. Government is actually going to take you there and fill those vacancies. So those who are able to be absorbed internationally must do so. Then the next part is that we must look at all of our labor absorptive industries, and government must subsidize those labor absorptive industries to sustain the current employment, increase employment, and increase employment of young people. And then we add a tax incentives that says when you increase employment of younger people, you pay less in terms of tax. So now you have dealt with the productive sector, and you're also dealing with the part that speaks to increase of output in our GDP. So then we are move away from being a government or a country that's reliant on the social basket, because the economy isn't functioning properly. So then we deal with law enforcement. Law enforcement is a big component of what we are trying to do as a country, because Ubuntu tells us that to maintain a situation where I am, because we are also, it requires a particular type of law enforcement, very strong law enforcement. In fact, one of my colleagues was making an example about a Zulu security guard who tells you when you arrive late at a building that umthetho awuvumi. When someone says that, you already know that you can't negotiate any further, and that's the end of the full stop. So we must have the type of law enforcement where people understand when when the law enforcement says this is the point and not beyond this point. So the biggest way to deal with crime is closing hunger. Yes, we must increase police. We must do so definitely, but we must deal with it at source. I don't want to arrest more young people. I want to get them before they make the decision to go and fill their stomachs by engaging in crime. So it's a due process. So we tighten up our crime. We get more young people engaged in productive means. At the same time, we increase our forces on the ground. But most importantly, what do we do to you when you are arrested and convicted? Which leads into some controversy for us, because we believe that once you are arrested, you must lose your right to vote as a convicted prisoner serving a sentence until you've served your full sentence. So then we firmly believe that if you've committed a crime against society, going back to our ideology about an individual and society, once an individual has taken the decision to go against society and committed a crime, you must pay for that. And it means that when you go and serve, you must also appreciate that your rights will be limited, and there's certain things you'll not be able to do. And in fact, you'll be paying your debt to society. So I think those are the biggest part that we're going to do. I'm leaving the part about primary healthcare because I think it's the biggest topical part for today.
Right. Now, the main conversation today is around healthcare. All right. We are a digital channel that's focused on, facilitating conversations, sometimes difficult conversations around issues of health broadly. So that's why we invited you. We wanted to know, what is it that Xiluva Party plans to do. Now, but before I ask you, what is it that you plan to do? What is your diagnosis of the current health system in South Africa, especially, the public health system, where the majority of South Africans are actually dependent on, they don't have a choice to go to the private health system. So where are you sitting as the Xiluva Party? What are maybe 4 or 5 things that you think are the things that are very wrong, in the system, they are making it dysfunctional? Then, obviously, following that, what is it that you guys would like to do? Should you be the governing party after the 29th of May?
Yeah. Look, I'm going to just speak broadly and also just give an opportunity to our doctor who advises us on health matters. Yeah. From our perspective, I'll sum up in the following and say, one is leadership. We've noticed that, so there's a number of manifestations of symptoms. And when we get to the root cause, we summarize those as leadership, governance, planning, resources, both the human and financial resources. But at the same time, there's also an issue about access. And access also speaks to the socio-economic situation we have in the country, because we also know that access is determined by where you are. If you're in a middle-class area, your access is improved to these facilities. If you're in an informal settlement, as I've been spending time in informal settlements, access to primary healthcare and clinics is very difficult. But beyond the issue about when you get sick and access to those facilities, I think we hardly have the conversation about the type of society we have, and the type of society and the type of choices we make around food. What is staple food for us? And in fact, when I met our health advisor, who at the stage was my medical doctor, he spoke to me about sugar and carbs. And at that stage, I didn't take very seriously. And these are the two basic and staple, consistent part of my diet. And they actually found that what is also a staple food for Black people in the main, maize, is very problematic. And we don't start with the healthcare from preventative perspective. We often start from treating, and as a consequence of the lifestyle that we live, which is problematic for us. So I want Dr. Mathe just to elaborate a bit briefly about these areas that I've spoken to, because he's actually a part of the health system in our country from a public perspective, and he can give better anecdotes than I can. Dr. Mathe?
Thank you, my leader. Good evening to everyone. Thanks for that. I think my leader is quite correct in that one of the things that we are as our healthcare system is very much reactive. We're geared more towards treatment than we are at prevention. And interestingly, when you speak of resources, if you put your resources in the wrong place, you'll get the wrong outcomes. As a doctor, I'm sure Dr. Fundi, you'll know, unless you make the right diagnosis, you're going to give the wrong treatment. It may be the right treatment for something else, but it's a wrong treatment for this. So part of it is we don't do hardly ever enough prevention. And prevention is done at primary care level. And unfortunately, the way our public healthcare system is structured is very much treatment-centric, and it's centralized. We have not put, we speak of primary healthcare as being the backbone of healthcare, but we don't put resources, we don't put energy, we don't put effort into that primary healthcare. And all you've got to do is just look at the provincial budgets, and you'll see just how much money is spent on, say, a tertiary hospital, as opposed to the X number of clinics that you find around that hospital. So we've made the wrong diagnosis, and therefore we've put resources into the wrong treatment, and that's why we're getting the outcomes we're getting.
All right. So that's the first thing that you mentioned. The president mentioned the issue of leadership. I would even say leadership and management. Can you comment on that, Dr. Mathe? Because in the hospitals, you've got your CEOs there who are appointed. Some of them purely clinical kind of people. They've never had any exposure to leading and managing, or even having qualifications like the BBA that the president has, on top of MBCHB or any other health professional qualification. So can you just talk around leadership?
So one of the key pillars that Xiluva ascribes to is one of meritocracy. You have to choose the right person for the right position. I'll give an example. I was once offered a position to be CEO of a hospital, and I said to them, "Cloud, I'm not equipped for it. I'm a clinician at heart. I'm not a great administrator, and I would do a bad job at it." And I think it's important to pick the right people for those positions. And to do that means they've got to be suitably qualified. It should not be a function of which political party do they align with, what their ideology is. It's a function of, can they take this hospital and run it? And once you've picked them, you then have to give them the powers and the resources to implement what you said they should. It's one thing to have a CEO running a hospital who can't even order a repairs to their autoclave. Therefore, they can't run theater cases. At the end of the year, look at their performance and say, but you guys were going to perform X number of operations, yet you did not. But nobody mentions the fact that I couldn't get my autoclave fixed because that's been done by somebody else. So we've got to get the right people with the right qualifications.
Yeah. Issues of infrastructure and equipment, any comment around that?
We don't have a money problem in South Africa. We've got a poor resource allocation problem. We're putting money towards the wrong things. I don't know how much was spent on the skinny jeans at a popular hospital in the East Rand. That money could have been better spent buying gelcos. Anecdotally, I remember a time I was at a hospital where we didn't have gelcos for pediatrics. Yet at a management meeting, the CEO was much more worried about what the doctors were wearing. We're in the middle of a crisis and you're worried about dress code. So I think if we're talking about equipment, we've got to put the right equipment at the right level. So if you ask me, should hospitals have all of the CTGs to monitor babies? Your CTGs should be sitting in your MOUs. So if I got a budget tomorrow and I could buy 100 CTGs, I would send the majority down to primary healthcare because that's where the treatment should be happening.
Lovely, lovely. All right. So you guys have talked about leadership. You've talked about focus on prevention and less on treatment or curative medicine. Staffing. Any comment around staffing in the current scenario? We've got young doctors who have finished post-ComServe, and it's a struggle to actually accommodate them. So in the context of that, is there anything that you'd like to say around that?
I think ineptitude shows itself even when you don't want to show it. How you sit in a country that, by its own numbers, we say we have a shortage of doctors. We went out as a country, we've built other universities, we've told your traditional university to increase their output. We've sent students to Cuba to go learn medicine. So we're saying we need more doctors. And then we turn around and say we don't have posts for them. That makes less than no sense. So I think our human resource plan, or should I say our human resource diagram, because it can't be a plan. A plan has got, it's got timelines and so on. Clearly, it's not a plan. The human resource diagram that the department itself has is not only is it incorrect in the sense that it places people at the wrong places. If I got a lot of doctors tomorrow, ComServe, post-ComServe, I would take those doctors and I would staff my primary healthcare clinic with them. If you think about it logically, Dr. Fundi, the hospitals, our hospitals are full of patients who get strokes and heart attacks. Those strokes and heart attacks are an indication of a failure to properly treat the diabetes and hypertension. And those people are getting treated at primary care level. So if you treated them properly there, you could reduce the burden on hospitals. Therefore, you could make more resources available for primary health care, therefore offloading your hospitals. And it'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we'll end up with a healthcare system where you could be sitting at a clinic and a specialist could come visit you at the clinic because the hospitals have got basic, important work to do, not treating patients with hypertension and diabetes.
Right. So the last thing I want you to comment on, because before we go to the manifesto, because President has to attend something at 1:45. So issues of corruption, malfeasance, you've mentioned the issue of skinny jeans, at one of the hospitals here, not far from Midrand. So any comment around, the issues of corruption, malfeasance, and mismanagement?
I think if Bongani Baloyi was president of the country tomorrow, and he would appoint a minister of health who's well-versed, he would appoint MECs if we still kept the provinces, which we plan not to. What you would then do is we spoke of meritocracy. You put the right people in the positions, and then you give them the tools that they need. Part of the problems now is, even if you're a CEO of a hospital and you identify a problem, the corruption is so ingrained into the system. It's part of the DNA, that one of the things you would need to do when you get in there is to remove those people who possess such DNA. I mean, things are so bad that, we know a case of where somebody went to stores to go get pens for use in the wards. And when he got there, the guy in charge of stores said, "So, Orenta, what are you saying to me?" These people work in the same hospital. Your job is to dispense of the pens, yet you're asking for a bribe. That's how deeply rooted it is. So I would say we give the CEOs powers to then be able to call in the hawks if they need to say, "Listen, I've got a problem in stores. I've got a problem in laundry. I've got a problem at procurement. Please go clean it out." That way they're not at risk. Because once we clean out that corruption, we can actually use the rands and cents where they are needed. And that should provide healthcare to our people.
And the ever-rising medical legal claims, in all of the provinces. Any comment around that?
Again, self-fulfilling prophecies. If you have a shortage of doctors and you don't hire doctors, you're going to have fewer doctors doing most of the work. Therefore, mistakes will creep in. It's human nature. So we are reaping. Right now, we're reaping we're getting the benefits of the bad management decisions that have been made. So I would, as I said, you've got to staff the correct place with the correct number of staff. Medical legal cases we see now, it's not a function of people necessarily being inept or not being qualified. It's because the environment within their work is just not suitable. I'll give you a simple example, Doc. When you're running an obstetric gynecology department, at any given time in the evening for after hours, you need 3 doctors on call. Because if there's a cesarean section on any operation that happens, 2 doctors are going to go to theater to do that operation. There needs to be 1 doctor still on the ground, running around, managing any patient that may need to be booked for theater. If you've only got 2, that means you're going to have a patient sitting in casualty who needs a cesarean section, but there's no one to assess them and to book them for theater. And when you then have an adverse outcome, what then happens? We say, "Oh no, the department doesn't have money to hire more doctors because of medical legal issues." We have to break that cycle, and that starts with staff the correct level with the correct resources. You will then be able to start turning the tide with the medical legal cases.
Lovely. So I've got colleagues here. Liesl Anthony, she's a clinical psychologist and a colleague of mine at work. But also I've got Nokutula Shange, who is a friend of ours in this channel. And she's a young person under the age of 30. And she's got some questions to pose to both yourself and the president, Mr. Baloyi. So maybe Liesl, the president did talk about, substance abuse and risky behavior, issues that one would put as escapism. They're escaping from something, unemployment and other social ills. But anyway, pose the question to Bongani, and thereafter Nokutula can ask a question so that we can get some answers from the 2 guests of ours.
Thank you, Dr. Nyati. Yes, Dr. Mate and Mr. Baloyi. So we know that in South Africa, the majority of people suffer under the triple threat of unemployment, inequality, poverty. We also know that the majority of our youth, the one study just indicated 59% of youth in South Africa is unemployed. But we also know that the majority of South Africans, are bound by the social ills of substance abuse, and substance abuse leading to a range of different social ills. So we get gender-based violence, we have intimate partner violence, and we have the trauma associated with it. So I hear that you're talking about primary health care and that the focus should be there. How then will you incorporate mental health care and mental health care to the vulnerable of the most vulnerable, and especially the female-headed households, but also the youth, to be able to access that on primary care level?
So I think the first thing, thank you for that question, and your diagnosis is spot on. I think the first thing to do is is to integrating healthcare. One of the mistakes I think we've made in the past is we've had a standalone primary mental health care clinic or a mental health care section, which then says that mental health care is separate, it's different, it's special. We made the similar mistake with HIV, and we realized afterwards we need to integrate it into one basket of care. So I think part of what we would do is we would build in mental health care as part of the service offering that should be offered at every primary health care clinic. If not, at least at a district healthcare clinic level, where patients can then be referred to. But that's number one. But number two is that we would need to work extensively with NGOs that are already doing this work. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to empower the NGOs, work along with them, which also means we need to pay them what is due to them. There are NGOs now that are doing substance abuse detoxing that are sitting with no money. And if they don't have money, they don't have money to buy drugs, they don't have money to pay the counselors. So these young people have got nowhere to go. And the moment you remove places of safety for them, where they can feel comfortable to get the care that they need, you're just perpetuating the problem. So I think rebuild primary healthcare, staff it appropriately, and work with the organizations that are already doing the work and staff them appropriately. I think that's probably the quickest and the simplest thing that we could do. Long term would be to, as we speak about prevention, is how do you prevent young people being in that situation in the first place? If they come from a broken household, which a lot of our young people do, what social netting do they have to stop them from ending up walking down that road where they end up being substance abusers themselves? So it talks to having a broader societal conversation and having an agreement with society that this is the way we want to go. Because what works in town A may not necessarily work in town B. So we've got to be open to say there'll be different solutions for different places.
Thank you.
Lovely. Nobuthula?
And thank you for your thoughtful contribution, Bongani Baloyi and Dr. Mate. Of it, I believe the initiation of Xiluva, it's geared toward the youth demographic in South Africa, which raises the question about the importance of small parties in our demographic landscape, of which I believe it's about bringing different voices into the parliament, especially more young people. My question for you today is around young people, obvious. Given the content you've raised about the increased alcohol consumption among young people in South Africa, how does Xiluva plan to tackle this issue and also promote the healthier lifestyles and choices among the youth population, particularly in relation to substance abuse and its impact on the overall well-being? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I think that my president had already alluded to this, to say that we need to understand that the social ills that we're facing are as a direct result of the societal problems that we have. We always say that health is impacted by pretty much any department, is impacted by all departments. If, for example, water and sanitation isn't doing their bit, you get an outbreak that health has to deal with. If social development is not playing their part, you get young people that feel left out. So I think it's about understanding and diagnosing the root cause. Young people sitting fallow, doing nothing. Brilliant minds that have gone to varsity. You know, we tell people, we tell young people all the time, go to school, do well, get your degree, and you'll get a job. How many graduates are sitting at home right now? And those graduates then become depressed, they become despondent, they see no future for themselves, and they have to escape this reality that they find themselves in. There's a young man from a village in Limpopo, the first doctor to ever come out of that village. That young man did his internship, did his ComServe, finds himself unemployed. He, right now, as we speak, he sits on the rock at the corner with his fellow mates that are his age group, who have not gone to varsity, have not done anything, and he's sitting there along with them. So we are fundamentally failing our young people. And all of those things then impact on health, because as you said, they end up engaging in alcohol, and the results of that are risky sexual behavior. And that's why we're seeing a rise in the number of sexually transmitted diseases amongst young people. Condom use is as low as it's ever been amongst young people. And part of the problem, Part of the problem is that we're not dealing with the root cause of where they are. And that talks to the economy. As a Minister of Health, I can't fix the economy. But as Xiluva, as a party, if we fix the economy, we're able to create opportunities for young people to work. We show them a life beyond what they're seeing now. We show them a life that's not so despondent. We'll begin to turn the tide against substance abuse. Now, those who we have missed and are already engaging and are victims of substance abuse, how do we help them to get out of that situation? And that talks to what I've just spoken about, to say we've got to give them the resources to change their lives around. We need to give them the appropriate facilities that they can go to get that assistance. And once that happens, once the young man or young woman has made the decision to leave Nyaupe or to leave other drugs or to leave alcohol, we then have to say to them, leave this life so you can lead this life. And that talks to them then having some sort of future that they can look forward to. And that's why I encourage everyone, vote for Xiluva so we can fix this country and give young people what they need, a chance.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The big thing, though, obviously we have to use the current situation as, the departure point. Now, our ruling party, has come up with the idea of universal health coverage, specifically national health insurance, system, as a panacea, a solution for all the problems in healthcare. Now, as Xiluva, where do you stand as far as the proposed national health insurance?
So firstly, NHI is the concept of NHI is an ill-conceived, poorly worded, badly thought out. I can't even call it a policy because, again, it doesn't have timelines, it doesn't have specifics. As it is right now, it's just an idea. So the idea of universal health coverage is essential. I'm in private practice, and I think it's exceedingly unfair that my neighbor who helped raise me cannot access me because they don't have medical aid and they don't have money. I don't think it's correct that the society that raised us as young doctors is unable to see us because of the current structure of the system. So universal health coverage is extremely important. The way that they have written it now, I don't want to say structure that's giving them too much credit.
The bill itself.
The bill itself, I mean, I've never seen a green paper and a white paper that look exactly the same. It's supposed to change as it goes up. It is supposed to have specifics. Right now, they're saying, no, let's implement. We'll see when we get there. They've implemented. And so when they get there, when they did life easy, there was no plan. It was just an idea that they rushed. So let's not life easy in our healthcare system, because they're talking about removing tax credits. If you're going to remove tax credits from, say, all the government employees, the GEMS subsidy forms part of their remuneration package. It forms part of what was negotiated between the unions. How do you then just arbitrarily remove it, then put it into a fund, and then we say, no, we'll see what we do with it? That makes no sense. So we are in agreement.
Sorry, Doc. Just to correct you there. Remember, there is the contributions, by the employer and the employee, right? Mm-hmm. But as an individual, you get some tax rebate. You're not getting it on your hand, but the amount of tax you're paying for the year is a bit lower. So they are saying they must take that from everyone who is a medical aid member, right? And then that money is used to fix the clinics and the hospitals and stuff. What's wrong with that?
We don't have a money problem. Remember that these guys went and got a loan from World Bank or Russia or something for COVID. Where did that go? We don't have a money problem. We've got an inability to spend the money correctly problem. So unless you fix that first, it's a bit like when a room is flooded, doctor. If a room is flooded because a tap is open, before you go put out a tender to get guys in to sweep the water out, you've got to close the tap. As it stands now, that tap is wide open. It doesn't matter how much money they put in, it won't solve the problem. So I don't think, as it is now, the idea that if we get this private sector money, our health will be better, that's simply not true. And there's no evidence to back that.
Yeah. Now, as a private practitioner who is in the private healthcare system, that services about 16 to 17% of the population. Are you worried about the NHI being, signed into law? Because the president is looking for a pen to sign any moment now. Are you worried about the future of you being in the private? Are you worried about the future of your private medical practice?
I am. Well, I was, and then I realized who wants to implement this and their track record on implementation. So then I stopped being worried, because firstly, there are too many unknowns with this thing. For example, one of the things that they have not done is to say what is going to be the payment method, the remuneration method for any person, whether it's a doctor, a nurse, a psychologist, with this thing. We don't know. So I can't even begin to plan to say, how do I play in the NHI space? There's insufficient data to make a decision. That's number one. Number two, the healthcare pool, the pool of people in private who are in private healthcare is shrinking. With the job losses that we have in the country, medical aid membership is dropping. So my private practice is already at risk because the pool of people is shrinking. Now they want to shrink it further with the removal of the subsidies, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, I was very worried to say that these guys are going to take a system that's not perfect, but is actually working and tear it apart. But I took great comfort in the fact that they are unable to carry out their plans anyway. So we probably shouldn't worry too much. And as for the president finding a pen, he's shown that he's not good at making decisive decisions. So he's unlikely to sign.
So there's a clause 33 there in that bill that says once NHI has been successfully rolled out, then the medical aids will cease to exist. They can only be top-up medical schemes. Now, that's the main funding method for the private sector. So are you worried about that clause? Because many stakeholders in healthcare are actually quite concerned about that clause.
I am worried about that clause because part of the problem is South Africa's got a fantastic healthcare system. And we see it with some of the outcomes, especially that we see in private sector. We really have a very good system. We've got access to world-class equipment, world-class drugs. One of the big problems you have is that the private healthcare sector has got such a limitation in the drugs that they can use, as an example. The scope of the ability to choose what's appropriate for the patient in front of you is so much smaller. So if you remove private healthcare, you are saying to everyone, you will use exactly the same things no matter who you are, no matter what your circumstances are. And what is good for me is not necessarily good for Dr. Fundi. And you need the ability to be able to give Dr. Fundi what he needs and what Dr. Mati what he needs. So the removal of the option to get private medical aid means you are going to remove people's right to choose. And the right of choice is one of the fundamental rights we have in healthcare. People have a right to choose what they want when they want it. If you remove that, you are going to remove choice. And that's going to be deeply problematic. And I can tell you, will drive specialists out of this country.
So our constitution, section 27, 1, A, basically says every South African has a right to quality health care, including reproductive health. And then the 27.1 B basically says the state must do everything within reason to make sure that every South African has got that access to healthcare. Now, the reality, though, is that at this moment, that many people don't enjoy that basic human right. So what is your view then about, an argument that says the NHI is supposed to address the health inequity by ensuring that everybody then has access. And if you are affluent, you can afford to top up, then you can then do so. But at least everybody will have been catered for and there's no payment at the point of care.
I started by saying if you make the wrong diagnosis, you'll give the wrong treatment. I'll give you a simple example. If you walk into any township anywhere in the country, and you look at what is the nearest health facility that's accessible to most people in that township, it's a doctor's rooms. It's not a clinic. There are more surgeries of doctors than there are clinics. So if there was a serious interest in improving access to healthcare, then there would have been a discussion with private practitioners to say, how do we decanter our chronic hypertensive and diabetics for you to manage at that level, thereby freeing our primary healthcare clinic from dealing with actually sick people, not having old ladies sit there from 4 o'clock in the morning just to get a repeat of the same medication to control the blood pressure, which is not controlling the blood pressure at all. So if we want to talk about giving access to quality healthcare, the facilities already exist. The infrastructure is already there. It's just about using the current resources correctly. Taking out and cutting out private healthcare will not solve that. Making me shut down my private practice will not improve access. If anything, you're going to reduce access. So it's really about reimagining the healthcare system. Even with the current funding, we could still do so much more. Yes, if we had access to the billions in private healthcare, we could do more, but not with this current government. If they had access to more billions, there'll be more billions down the drain.
All right. Closing remarks, Liesl, and closing remarks to you, Nokuthula. In the meantime, I'm not sure if the president is back or not, because I wanted you guys to say, we normally call it an elevator pitch. What is it that you want to say to the potential viewers who are following us on Facebook, on YouTube, those who are undecided, or those who were impressed by what you guys have said? So I'll give you a minute, Doc, after the two people have spoken. If the president is back, then I'll give him also, maybe a minute to just wrap up and say why Xiluva. All right. So in the meantime, whilst the two ladies are giving their last minute, words, think about the selling pitch for Xiluva. All right, Liesl, let's start with you.
Yes, thank you, Doc. Yes, just briefly from me, I think as a woman, one would like to know what Xiluva is looking at in terms of child and maternal health care, and how, the majority of women in South Africa would have access to that. So it's not necessarily something to answer on, but something that I was hoping to hear in the conversation as well. I hear that there's a lot of preventative, that the perspective is around preventative healthcare, and I think that is a good way of looking at it. But I think currently there are people still suffering, and prevention, yes, we should look at it, but also we should hear more about how are we changing the current state and also access for those who need it most, and especially in the rural areas. Thank you, Doc.
All right. Nokuthula, I think I also want Portia to say something. I know she's here to support the president and Dr. Matebate. Her closing remarks about why people should, consider Xiluva. So yeah, Nokuthula.
Thank you, Doc. Even though big parties, they usually get more attention, but I believe small parties can still make a very big difference. So with the case of Xiluva, that means if we vote for Xiluva, that means we're sending more young people to the parliament to speak up for change, and that's the critical part that makes me happy as a young person, being represented to the political landscape. So that's all I can say.
But Nokuthula, I think I must challenge you there. There's a few people who were in parliament who were leading the fees must fall and other, active things, and they went to parliament and they kept quiet once they got there. So is there a guarantee that when the young people go there, they are not just going to enjoy the food that is there and say less for the constituency?
No, Doc. I believe we can have more potential young people that go to parliament as an independent candidate. I think it's a matter of enforcing young people to be political educated, of which I believe we would see, since the Constitution of South Africa is giving more young people to run for votes. I think there's a big change that is coming.
Lovely, lovely. All right, Portia, in the absence of the president, who's still with other radio stations, you need to represent him.
I was just going to say, Doc, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. But I really think that I'll be repeating myself in terms of what the leader has said when he started his conversation, when we started the webinar, but also repeating what Dr. Mata has said, because basically this conversation was around the healthcare and how Xiluva plans to improve our healthcare system within the space. And I think he has done a brilliant job in really putting out our plans in terms of what it is that we plan to do. If I were to go into it, it would be merely a repetition of what it is that I'm saying. I do apologize. The leader has got commitments, obviously, at 7 o'clock, and I'm not too sure, because I can see he's still on, but I'm not too sure whether he is. He's got that commitment with Metro FM. He did indicate that. So apologies for that if he's unable to come back, obviously, and give closing remarks.
Okay.
But I think I would like for Dr. Mate to really wrap it up in terms of just our focus on the healthcare system and where Xiluva places it, within the framework of our politics within South Africa, if one can put it that way.
Thank you very much, Portia. You've been well trained as a politician. You've answered, but not answered, but it's okay. Thank you very much. Dr. Mate, you have the job of giving us that last pitch that will remain in people's minds about what Xiluva plans to do broadly and what they plan to do in healthcare in particular. So you've got 2 minutes to do that.
The ruling party's president and the national chairperson once coined a phrase, and they said that these clever blacks are a problem, and they told them where to get off. Xiluva is a concentration of clever blacks. We are not only educated, we are passionate, and we want to make a difference. And we do this not because we're self-serving, but we do this because this is a requirement for the future of our country. I've got 4 children, sorry. And my kids need a country to live in when they grow up. I need to leave them a legacy. And the days of us sitting aside and watching these so-called big parties run the country have to end. And that is why some of us have had to step back in and say, what difference can we make? Xiluva is different, and I would argue better. And we're different and better because we're not big, because we don't have a legacy of the so-called fighting for revolution, because we don't have a history of being bad in government. We come in with new ideas, simple ideas, basic ideas to just do things right. And this is where Ubuntu comes in. President spoke about our founding principle is Ubuntu. Ubuntu says that if I am sitting in procurement, I am not going to steal the food parcels that are meant for the poor and put them in my fridge when I can afford to pay for myself. It's that underlying principle that says that I care for others because I care for myself.
Yeah.
And this is why we are here. So all you've got to do is very simple. Go to the ballot paper, find the X, and put X next to the X, and you'll be sorted. With that, I thank you.
So Ubuntu and youth power. So you guys are targeting the youth segment of of our population or of our voters, unashamedly so.
Yes.
Right? Why?
Because the youth is the future. Currently, we're looking at our future now, and it's bleak. And we can either throw our hands in the air and say, or we can say, no. We need to put those young people back onto a path of hope, of prosperity, of a future that they can look forward to. And we can't do that without them. We cannot change this country without the youth. They happen to make up the biggest voting bloc. They also happen to make up the biggest group of people that don't vote. And the reason they stopped voting is because they said, what's the point? We're saying to them, we are the point why you should vote for us. Because you vote for us, we will give you a future that you can be proud of, a future that you can even look forward to your own kids having. So unashamedly, we're definitely targeting the youth. They are our future after all.
Thank you very much, Doc. I think you could do very well in marketing as well. So if you ever needed to diversify your skills from your practice, I think you can consult in marketing as well. Thank you very much, Doc. I appreciate your time. And also thank you to your president for availing himself for at least 45 minutes of our 60-minute. And thank you, Portia, for facilitating that you guys, come and honor this invitation. And thank you to Liesl, for always being there to ask questions, especially for those people with XX genes. And also Noctula for always being around to assist and put across the views of the young people of South Africa. And thank you to everybody who was following via the YouTube channel or via the Facebook channel. Until next time, thank you very much. And may you all, reflect tomorrow on Workers' Day and know that there are quite a number of people who are unemployed, who wish to celebrate that day, but it's a day that doesn't really mean much to them because they are unemployed. So thank you very much. And let's look forward to the 29th of May. And maybe we'll see Dr. Mate as the next Minister of Health. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Lovely.
Thank you.
All right.